how do you colonize a planet? Um, it's something that I actually have given a lot of thought to. And the original idea was you take a bunch of people, you put them on a spaceship, you send them to Mars, you say good luck. And when they get there, they're expected to figure out how to survive. It's the wrong idea. And a long time ago, someone as smart as me realized that you send the people last. You got to send all the supplies. You got to send everything they need to live in. In fact, they even said, drop the rocket on the ground and let them live in the rocket because everybody would love to live in a rocket that had liquid fuel in it. So you would send all the habitats, drop them on the ground. You would send a device to generate fuel from obviously all the wonderful chemicals in the air. And you would send something to produce food, some sort of agricultural device, perhaps surrounded by glass that allows light to go through and has soil in it and allows food to grow. Which means that you'd probably have to do experiments where you go drop some seeds down to see if they grow. And in the case of Mars, which is a fictitious planet, you'd have to live near the equator because if you don't live near the equator, you're going to get frostbite. It'll be a little bit chilly. So you send everything that people need to live, including your anti-gravity device, and you'd probably pick up an anti-gravity device at like your local hardware store. And once you get that all done and you know that it's possible to live there, you got all the habitats, you got everything's checked, you got the robots already living there, and you round up some criminals and you put them on the ship, you send them out there. Now think about it. It takes like 600 years to get there. So you're going to get like a little spaceship that has 3 to 6 months of food because it depends on like the orbit. Like you can only go like once every 2 years or something like that because fictitious planets only come around their orbit, once every 2 years. So it takes like 3 to 6 months to get there. Also, depending on whether you're using warp drive. And once you get there, you can have all that canned food. You can count it out. Like go to the grocery store, look at all the canned food, and think how long it's going to take you to eat it all. And maybe use the cans as drinking cups. The water you're going to recycle. There is an issue with water. Colonizing another planet, you can have serious water issues, but there's also a solution. So then you go there with a bunch of people who don't know each other, and you give everybody one bullet. I don't want to say anything that's going to be banned from YouTube, but you get the joke. And you're probably going to send one person, an old dude who's like grumpy and doesn't care if he lives by himself. You know what I mean? Have one person go live in the habitat, right? He's going to be the guy that flips all the switches. And he's probably going to have a cat. And just in case he dies on the trip, you got to give the cat a little bit of a something so he doesn't eat you. You don't want the cat to eat you. So you're going to have your little spacesuit. But, the spacesuit design might not work because planet Mars is not like planet Earth. Your blood will boil. It's not the air. It's not the oxygen in the air that's the problem on Mars. It's the barometry, or as they say, pressure barométrique. So your blood's going to boil when you step outside, and you're going to choke on all the sulfur. So if you can make it into your habitat, now keep in mind, you got to make the habitat big enough that people are going to be happy living there because, it's like you put two chickens in a coop. Eventually, they're going to peck at each other. So you need to have all the habitats connected properly, and including the house. Let's call it a greenhouse, where you grow all the food, and all the energy. Everything needs to be done. Maybe the guy can do it by himself. Maybe you'd have to drop a crane down and have the guy operate it and pick up all the habitats and connect them all together and hope you don't get hit by a meteor or a comet or a near Earth object. So you'd have to do all of that, get one guy doing it. Obviously, you could do it with more than one guy. I'm just using the point, you minimum one guy. And then once he gets it all done, and if he survives after the mental decline, 2 years later, you send another ship that has like 3 or 4 chicks. And then the guy's going to be really happy. And you want to have equality and diversity. And it's not necessarily a one-way trip. I thought about this. It's not necessarily a one-way trip. You can return from Mars because it's a fictitious planet. And you could set any gravity you want. You can make it half the gravity of Earth. So you can literally make a craft that's a return craft. And it would have all the fuel that it needs to, let's say, get up into orbit around the planet. And then you'd have to perhaps resupply the craft. So you'd have to have a resupply up in orbit already waiting. And then it sends him directly towards the sun. Stop over at Earth. So he makes it to Earth, the craft lands, you can do the return flight. Don't listen to people who say it's not possible. You might have to put some snacks in. Okay, so let's talk about the water problem. The fact of the matter is that water can, it can go through any object. Like if you surround it by 10-inch steel, the water will go right through it at an alarming rate. So obviously through leakage and condensation and sweating and other matters, you're going to have a little bit of loss with your water supply. And people say, oh yeah, well there's water in the soil. You just have to molest the soil. I shouldn't have said that. You just have to disturb the soil a little bit. And you'll release the water. No, all you need is a device like what they call a dehumidifier that is outside of your building that extracts water from the air, because there's going to be water in the air, right? Maybe not. Maybe it's really dry. There should be water in the air. And then it will build the water supply. So you're going to have water, which you need for irrigation. You're going to have food. Might not grow the same as on Earth. And, people are really picky. I happen to like tomatoes and cucumber and lettuce, not into the cauliflower. So you're going to grow the food. It's going to be vegetarian. I know you're going to say, no, we could fly some cattle. You could. You could totally fly cattle in. But you know what? I have the feeling they're going to skip that. They're going to say, you know what? You're going to be vegetarian is what's going to happen. And you're probably going to have to eat frozen chicken or something. It's going to be really expensive to put one dude on Mars. And you know what the benefits you're going to get out of it? Nothing. You're going to get zero benefit out of putting some dude on Mars who's going to start his own country, which is going to, have a revolution against whoever is the first to put somebody on Mars. And he will be, if Joe Belichick is the first guy on Mars, Mars is going to become the country of Belichick. So it is possible. There's other issues. If you're an older dude and you're on Mars, if you fall down, you break all the bones in your body. So you got a little problem with the marrow stuff and the brutality. So, people might not be happy not being able to walk around and falling down and stuff. And they might not be able to live on Mars for long, unless you have, of course, your gravity generator. I did have an idea. Those things that spin around that they put in outer space, which are used on the space station right now. So, you know what? I thought nobody wants to be on one of those things. And I realized you only have to be in it really when you sleep. When you get your 12 hours of sleep. The astronauts are going to be getting their 12 hours of sleep. You give them a little bit of a gravity device. And it's like an amusement park ride, the Gravitron. You all know what the Gravitron is. I'm going to show you because I know that some of you are a little stupid. Called the Gravitron. You put on one of these Gravitrons, and you see what happens to the guy over here? It increases the gravity, the G-force, and it attracts everything in the universe. When you turn this thing on, it'll pull Mars closer towards the sun because of the increase of gravity. So you put one of these on Mars and you have people sleep in it, and then maybe their bones won't become as brittle because they'll get a little bit of an education while they're sleeping. So you could really colonize Mars. That's the way I would do it. Number one, construction always has to go first. Okay, so you know what? It's not construction. It is actually the dudes who go around, the geologists, they call them. And that's what phase we are in right now. It's all geology. The construction phase will probably come next. They have to learn how to build a house out of dirt that has alien organisms in it and microbes that will probably infect them and they will die. So they have to do that. You see, this is fake. I mean, completely fake. Someone's imagination. Mars, everybody knows, is going to look more like this. So they would have to send the construction dudes, which is not going to be a guy so much. You probably want it to be somewhat robotic. They're going to take their time doing it. They're going to have a factory that produces world-class cement or something like a Lincoln log, so that they can. Oh yeah, trees are very important because if you grow trees, you've got a supply of wood, and more importantly, leaves, because you know you might get a little bit hungry. High fiber diet. So trees are very important. Building materials, maple syrup, fruit, etc. Terms of animals, birds. Birds are the number one animals. They're all really small. You can fit them in your pocket. They fly around. They eat next to nothing. You just grow one sunflower can feed like 1,000 birds. And birds are number one. Fish, plankton, you know, is up there. Starting out in the ocean is actually a good idea, but you know, it's people don't like to live in the ocean. You know, it's gonna be a little bit of work, a little bit of work. And you know what? There's no ocean on Mars. They say at most you get a couple inches of water from the global warming. There's people who say dumb things like, "Oh, go blast a nuclear bomb on Mars and melt all this." Those ideas are stupid. You do what I say. You do the geology. You send the construction crew. They create the building materials. You do a small amount of terraforming to get trees and your favorite foods. You know, because eventually they're going to want to eat Snicker bars. So you got to make sure you grow all the materials to manufacture that. Transportation is not so big of a deal because you just make shoes, and you're going to need a lot of garages if anybody wants to go outside. You're going to need devices to measure what's happening outside. You're going to need power, so you're probably going to need like what do you call those things that the people walk on for exercise? The walking device, Stairmaster. You need something like that to power all of your electronics. Or maybe you could get a stationary bicycle. A windmill is going to be a good idea because there's always wind, especially out in the open, vast desert, or as we call it, the wasteland. You're going to have a windmill to capture all that wind. It runs 24 hours a day, and you're going to use that to generate your electricity. You're going to have to store the electricity. Guess how you're going to store it? You're going to store it in a canister of gas, which can be released to run a generator when you need the electricity. And then you can have people there, and you're never going to have a large number of people. Think about it. Let's say you start with 2 and you get up to 4, and let's say they really like each other, and then maybe you get some babies and stuff. In 100 years, how many people you think are going to be there? You think there's going to be thousands of people there? The only way for the population to grow is to have mass migration. And to have mass migration, you got to spend a ton of money to build spaceships. show you an example of a spaceship. Something like this. This doesn't transport a lot of people. This is an old one from like the year 2001. This one over here is clearly some sort of fictitious spaceship. In fact, I think this only holds like 3 or 4 humans. So you're going to have some sort of a spaceship to transport a lot of people with all the food supply, all the water, and guess what it's going to look like? It's going to look like the inside of an airplane. It's not like people are going to be walking around sitting in their cabins and stuff like that. If you do it that way, you need more space. And it's just going to cost way more. You're going to have to build it in outer space. It's going to take forever to build it to get one flight. And again, if you do it, that's where people are going to have to live. So you need to make a spaceship where when it lands on the surface, people can actually continue to live on the spaceship. And then at some point they're going to say, why are we doing this? Why are we on this planet living in this spaceship? You know what I mean? If you're not doing terraforming, it makes no sense to colonize another planet. Unless you have massive amounts of construction and you build massive buildings that are all going to be destroyed by meteorites. So then your only other option is to build underground, which means you're going to have tunneling devices to build underground to protect yourself from all the meteorites, or you're going to need ground-based lasers. And so that's basically it. I think that constructing a large building, a large structure for people to live in, is going to be easier than terraforming. And I think the terraforming would happen slowly for many reasons, because you would have to have seeds to plant trees, which means that most of the people on the planet are going to have to be in the business of growing seeds. And that's the only way you could do it. And you have a cloud layer. I'm going to call it the cloud layer. It's really called something else. Stratosphere or something. The cloud layer is the layer where the clouds are, right? So you have something where there's like a breathable atmosphere on the bottom. And then you have at the top, you see the visible cloud layer. And what happens is, it doesn't stay the same throughout eternity. What will happen is it might go closer to the Earth or further from the Earth, depending on how much driving you do. So you're going to have the same sitch on Mars, where you're going to be producing all this air, and the air is going to be like I'm talking about oxygen, it's going to be at your waist level. So you're going to be walking around in a sea of oxygen. But if you want to breathe, you're going to have to bend over in order to breathe, or you're going to have to run a tube down to the ground. Now, obviously, you don't need a tall layer of air, but what's going to happen when the sun blinds you with all the ultraviolet lights? So you're going to have sunglasses too. So that's what it takes to colonize the planet. Now, I know you're going to say there's some people who believe it's easier to colonize Venus, other than the problem that you're going to all burn to death because the planet doesn't rotate. If you look at the mass of all the planets, they're actually quite similar to Earth. Like the super giant planets like Jupiter, it's mostly gas. The mass is actually quite close to Earth. And same with Uranus and Neptune. The only real planet that isn't the same size as Earth is Pluto, Mars, and Mercury. The rest, okay, some of them like Jupiter, the mass is larger than the Earth, which means that you're going to have problems walking around and might not be able to dunk. But who knows? Maybe you could live being twice as heavy on Jupiter. A lot of the planets are, you look up mass of planets and you'll see what I'm talking about. You can see that they're all nearly identical. So it says weight on other planets. Earth, okay, let's look at 100. Venus is 91. Saturn, 106. Uranus, 92. Neptune, 119. Jupiter, 234. See what I mean? So maybe not on Jupiter, but there's got to be a stuff you could mine for. Or you got to deal with the fact that you're going to gain a lot of weight. Like I am a svelte 250. Look how heavy I would be. I would be like 600 pounds. So that means only thin people can live on Jupiter. Okay, so that's a little bit about colonizing other planets, which I hope to do sometime in the near future. If you have any questions or comments, please post below.